All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully, your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers media network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And it's a little bit of a sad day. It's a little bit of a somber day as we get into our last match preview of the 2023-2024 Premier League season for Chelsea versus Bournemouth. And if it's a match preview, it's a little bit of a 1-2 duo. Myself, probably on the drums, providing a beat because the lead, the soloist, the guitarist, the man of the hour, the star of the stage is none other than CFC Central. You know him as Sam. Sam, are you excited to play a tune and close out the previews that we have been doing this season that the fans continue to write in and say just the nicest things about?
I mean, I've been supremely grateful for all the support and all the encouragement. It's just been great. I mean, it's been a tough season for all of us in terms of having to record, just after some really bad defeats. And, for me to finish a game, wanting to put it out of my memory forever, and then realizing I have to watch it again, make notes, and make sure that I got everything right. So yeah, it's not been easy at times, but yeah, it's just been great to laugh with other people on the Discord, to find a little bit of company in our collective misery, and I think we're reaping the rewards now. Good form towards the end of the season. We've got a lot to smile about, so no complaints, just gratitude, and long may that continue for everybody.
Yeah, it's nice to be heading in to the final match of the Premier League season with something left to play for. Chelsea should not be thinking about the beach just yet, but absolutely how they pick up 3 points against the Cherries to ensure that they lock up European football and hopefully Europa League football for next season versus Conference League. And the crux of that is, for those who are not keeping up to date, not following it, Chelsea in sixth position on in the table, 3 points behind Spurs in fifth, which the funniest thing that Spurs could do, the most Spursy thing that they could do would be to lose to Sheffield United, one of the historically worst sides in the Premier League in a Premier League campaign. So that Chelsea, if a win against Bournemouth could actually take them up to fifth based upon goal difference, making it so there's no need to keep an eye on the FA Cup to see if the sixth spot is actually going to be a Conference League spot or potentially a Europa League spot. But I know, Sam, you were locked in on how the results are kind of laying down here. How are you just maybe feeling before we talk about Bournemouth more generally, how they've been playing, getting into some of the questions around how Chelsea are going to set up to take advantage of it and lock up those 3 points? But we've talked about this idea of Chelsea qualifying for Europe, Europa League versus Conference League, and just what that means for how your opinion maybe is changing as it relates to the success or lack of success that Pochettino and this squad has had this season.
Yeah, it's an interesting equation to be honest, but yeah, fifth would be an incredible bonus, I think. I'm willing to consider the possibility that we might get it, considering
Thank you.
how Spurs are going. But yeah, but but again, like the one result that comes to mind for some odd reason is, Steven Gerrard's last game, and everybody was sort of gearing up for a nice farewell game, and it was against Stoke City, who were, I think, ninth at that point, and everybody was like, "Oh, Liverpool are going to put on a clinic." They finished sixth, so should be a game, and Liverpool lost 6-1. So, you never know in these kind of situations, even when Bournemouth don't have much to play for. It's just difficult to go into these games thinking they don't have motivation. You just have to put on your best possible performance and then cross your fingers that A, Tottenham bottle it again, and B, Manchester United don't build on their victory against Newcastle and go into an upset in the cup, because that would also be a bad thing for us being bumped down. So I'm hoping for at least one of those results, hopefully the latter to go our way, and hanging on to sixth. Europa League either way, fifth or sixth, so not really worried about it. But I think the Europa League will be a very good test for the players that we have, and a good challenge for them to not just go and get like used to the rhythm and rigors of European competition, like Matt Law said in one of the pods, but also to sort of give your goal and assist tally a bit of a continental boost, which I think would do everybody some good. And we've got a great record in the competition as well, 100%. Every time we've been in the Europa League, we won. So I'm hoping a third time will hopefully get us some more European silverware.
Never going to be disappointed if Chelsea go into a competition and win it. I think there are some people who love the idea of Conference League as the completing the set, effectively the Thanos gauntlet of Infinity Stones, but of European trophies. Take the money and the prestige of the Europa League over the Conference League any day of the week. As we get into this episode, though, before we start talking about Bournemouth, we just want to always do our little bit of admin at the top, thanking everybody who listens to the podcast. If you haven't done so yet, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's always appreciated. You also should jump on YouTube, subscribe to our video channel there, get notified by hitting the bell icon. Also, like and comment on the videos. And look, everybody's been saying nice things to Jake for the past couple weeks. You should leave a thanks, Sam, on this episode for the fact that we've done so many preview pods, so many squished in between some match reviews, some match discussion, and other updates that we've done. It's been a long season, so a thanks, Sam comment would go a long way. Another way to thank Sam is also subscribing to our free weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch. And look, tons of those coming out still, even as we head into the offseason and preseason. You also can join in the conversation, free or paid, in our Discord community as well. Another way to support the podcast and meet some new friends who also like Chelsea and not other terrible clubs that you could root for who happen to play in London. But we are going to shift our attention to Bournemouth. It is the last match of the season, and Bournemouth's recent form has been up and down. The last couple games they've had a chance to play. They lost 2-1 to Brentford most recently. They got waxed by Arsenal, and that's something we have in common. They only shipped 3 to what we shipped, 3-0. They had a win over Brighton. Again, something else we have in common. They won 3-0. They did beat Wolves 1-0 with a sending off at the very end of April. They lost to Aston Villa 3-1, and then they did have a draw against Man United. And just in general, as we think about how they're heading into this end of the season, Sam, thinking about where they are on the table, thinking about their generally journey upward, just behind Brighton, actually level on points, but behind on goal difference. They have found a little bit more form in the later half of the season than they had in the early parts of the season. And one could argue that they have done better than expected.
Oh, yes. I mean, I think the circumstances in which the change happened scared a lot of Bournemouth fans because Gary O'Neill was a much loved manager. And when he did well in that season before Iraola came to the club, everybody was like, okay, this is not good. Why are we changing something that's not broken? Why have I tried to fix it? And apparently, when Anthony Iraola came to the club, he was only allowed to get his conditioning coach. So a lot of uncertainty in their first 10 games. I think they lost 7 or like couldn't win 7. And everybody was saying what a horrible decision to go to Spain and pick up a manager and try to figure out whether he can implement his style of play in the Premier League. But after that, the form that they put together would effectively have pushed them somewhere around fifth or sixth. So it's been quite a ride, and I think it's a good club in terms of recruitment. They pick smart signings. For example, let's just say Dango Atara was a winger in Ligue 1 who I was watching very closely before we signed Mudryk, a two-footed winger who was creating all kinds of waves, and Bournemouth sort of stepped in and got him. Nico Jackson almost signed for them. The only reason it couldn't happen was because the medical failed, and they were told that Jackson would take an additional 30 days to recover from his injury. So um, the scouting has been spot on, and they've been trying to get the right kind of players for their manager, and he's just turned it around. I think next season could be an interesting season for them. I can almost see like a Oliver Glasner Crystal Palace kind of thing where they hit a new level, where they maybe make a couple more intelligent signings and take it from there. But undoubtedly, it's going to be a very interesting match. I think people are going to see it's going to be tougher than than what the mental picture is. It's an interesting side who play a very interesting brand of football, and yeah, we do need 1 point to absolutely guarantee it, and we should be aiming for the win, but it won't come easy. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, that is not a surprise when you think about how they've been getting on. I mean, they do have a couple of injuries. We do have a couple of players who are out. We know that Mikhailo Mudrik's season is over after his Instagram post and the injury he suffered in the match against Bournemouth, not adjudicated on pitch or with video assistant review. The Reece James making himself unavailable for the end of this season and the start of next season with his second red card of the Premier League season against Brighton. And then a few other players who are out on recovery protocol still: West Fofana, Romeo Lavia, Enzo Fernandez, Carney Chukwuemeka, Robert Sanchez. So as healthy potentially as this Chelsea team has been in quite some time, even with the players who are out. Again, we're recording this before Pochettino's pre-match press conference, so there's still a likelihood that some changes could happen. But I think in general, you feel like you could almost pencil in the majority of the 11 based upon the injuries that we see here and how Poch has set up the last 3 to 4 matches with a pretty much unchanged 11 in the last few, outside of maybe the Thiago Silva start for the sending away, the tribute game, as it were, for his time at Chelsea, which I think is gonna there's gonna be a lot of emotion on the day too, Sam. It's not just gonna be the Chelsea have potentially a point to secure it, 3 points to potentially, if Spurs go full Spurs, that you couldn't move up to fifth. That there's some goodbyes that are going to be taking place, and the Thiago Silva one's going to be pretty massive. I know we've talked about it a little bit before in the past couple episodes, but I think as we get closer, as we get a chance to now conceptualize it, and there's 90 minutes or less of Thiago Silva at Chelsea, which is sad.
It is, and if you do follow the women's team, which I absolutely recommend that you do, it's been a tough season of goodbyes. Frank Kirby, Emma Hayes, Maren Mjelde, and Catherine Berger on their side, and on our side, obviously, you mentioned Thiago Silva. Big miss. All of them are going to be sorely missed. Obviously, legends of the game. So it's just great to be able to give them the respect and the send off that they deserve. The King's Mirror send off was brilliant. The speeches were incredible from all of them. Emma Hayes obviously saying the job's not done. We need to go out there and focus and seal this title because you don't get a third chance. So brilliant to see that. And Silva will obviously first of all be saying that we need that 1 point to guarantee sixth, and we should be winning to make sure that if Tottenham slip up, we're not reliant on United going and winning the cup final. So sensational player. I wish he'd come earlier. I wish I would have been able to see him and John Terry playing together at some point in time. One of my unfulfilled dreams, but yeah, it's just great to be able to say that you watched Thiago Silva in Chelsea colours. It's a feeling like nothing else, and I'll say by every single minute he's on the pitch in his last game, and hopefully it'll be a winning one.
Well, we are going to get into how Bournemouth have been playing. What are some of the weaknesses that Chelsea can expose, among other topics? Before we do that, we're going to get our first ad break out of the way. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. All right, Sam. So let's set the stage. You mentioned the manager change that has occurred. You've mentioned a little bit about how that impact has impacted Bournemouth's style and how they've really leveraged that in this back half of the season. Why don't we kind of go through that before we start jumping into some of the pros or the positives and how they've been executing over this back half of the season and since the last time we saw them, which has been a minute. We played them in the very early part of the Premier League season, and we're getting to see them again on the very last day.
Yeah, a lot of things have changed for both clubs, I would say. And yeah, I mean, I would say they were also initially in their transitional phase, trying to figure out what the tactics were like, getting the new players sort of blooded in. So, the ideal time maybe to meet them, but we still couldn't manage to come away with 3 points, and we managed to only just get a goalless draw. So tough one there, but the evolution, at least on their behalf, has been interesting to see. They've had some good games, they've had some very, very bad games, but like I mentioned, it's just a unique style of play. Again, I should mention, Dan, their manager Anthony Iraola is also from Gipuzkoa, which is the small place no one knew about in the Basque country, but suddenly almost every single top manager you see in the Premier League elsewhere is from the same province. He's from there. Unai Emery is from there. Mikel Arteta is from there. Um, Xabi Alonso is from there. West Ham's next manager, Julian Lopetegui, could also be in the Premier League. He's from there, so suddenly, everybody's wondering what are they drinking there? What are they putting in their water? That every single top tactician is coming from this little place in the Basque Country. So, yeah, let's just start with how Bournemouth play for a little bit of refresher because it's been quite a long time. But what really brought him to prominence when he was in Spain with Rayo Vallecano is this modern kind of system about using aggressive pressing tactics, making sure that you're trying to win the ball. I mean, obviously, you're saying this is nothing new, but his hallmark or his trademark is something called a hybrid pressing system. So, what he does is when you're trying to build out, his teams will try to man mark you and they will effectively try to get as many people as required to match or numerically at least have a chance of winning the ball back from you. And once that phase is done, once they drop back, then they will go into almost like a zonal block where they're not really looking at the man, but they're just trying to cover space and they're trying to monitor people coming inside pockets and important zones. So that's what the fundamentals of his system are. He tries to make sure that there is no time in when you're building up and there's no space when you're attacking. So he denies you the two most important things in each phase of play. His press is very good. I think the side that they've built for him, getting Dominic Solanke, some very strong wingers who are good runners going both ways, very physical players who love running, who will selflessly chase down and try to press down every single loose ball. So it's a side that presses well, knows how to cover their angles. They will always try to push you to one side and spring an aggressive press. So that's something that you have to be very, very careful about. And once you misplace a pass or you sort of try to go long, they either recycle it or if you've lost the ball, then they immediately come back at you with their quick players and try to get those 1v1s and get Solanke in to cause a little bit of damage. I should mention numbers wise, Dan, they are one of the top teams in the Premier League for goals from high regains. So every time they win the ball in the attacking third, there's a very good chance it either ends in a dangerous shot or more likely it ends in a goal. So you don't want to mess up in build up. You don't want to give them the opportunity to do that. Manchester United did it, got punished really badly. Should have had one more after Dominic Solanke got 1v1 from a ball loss from McTominay, who was surrounded by four players, and he just passed it into space. Bournemouth collected it, tried to get past and into goal, and just about missed it. So not an easy side to play against when you're trying to build out. It's going to be very aggressive. But formation wise, it's almost always a 4-2-3-1. Interestingly, the three times they've changed formation, two of those occasions have happened in the last three games. They used a 4-4-2 in the win against Brighton. This was the first time that they've started with two centre forwards. And there was a 4-3-3 against Arsenal, which they sometimes use within games, but I haven't seen them like start with that formation. So interesting that maybe like with nothing to play for, Iraola is maybe like trying to use these as preseason fixtures, trying to figure out if he can change the shape, see how a two striker dynamic works with a couple of the new signings that they have. Enes Unal has come in, so how does he work with Solanke? Can we do something there? But yeah, you just have to also understand that this side's not going to be very focused on preferring to build up and try to have these intricate patterns of play where they play out of pressure and try to keep the ball so much. They're just very, very reliant on just their off the ball work, their out of possession work. They will be compact, they will press hard, they will try to win the ball, they will be fierce, and they will try to cause you issues when you lose it. So that's, I would say, something that, in essence, just simply tries to explain what they do with their football.
And I know that in general, it's also going to be a match, from a 1v1 perspective on the wings where, whether it's Malo Gusto, depending upon how fit he is, we know that he generally looked good on the night against Brighton, but maybe was struggling with a little bit of the knock at the end with the substitutions that occurred. And then with Mark Cucurella, who's been having a chance, and I want to talk about him a little bit more later when we focus on our team, but it is going to be a night of, or a day rather, of 1v1 challenges with some runners who are very happy to run it at the defenders. And in general, they also have a really good first half versus second half type of pattern. And so maybe it's like the perfect setup that both of our teams are really good in first halves, but pretty poor in second halves. That gives you a little mirror image moment between the two sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say that we've been very good, at least from an offensive perspective, in latter halves of games. I still have to put like a, maybe I'm saving it for the last newsletter of the season, but in terms of how many 90th minute winners we've scored, how many goals we've scored after the 75th minute, I don't think we've had this kind of a season in a long, long time. It's just been great to see the desire, the resilience to say it's not over yet, and grab a result when it looked dead and buried. Obviously, Nottingham Forest comes to mind, Manchester United comes to mind. Great, great results. So, pretty confident in our firepower. It's just we have to be very compact. Obviously, Reece James getting that red card contributed in Welbeck getting that 97th minute goal, but we have been slightly better in that regard. So, hopefully, that will continue with 11 men on the pitch. But you're right. When I look at their attack, it's again, like I mentioned, maybe the profiles are designed in a way that they're optimized for hard running, long yards, and being able to cover a lot of ground in transition both ways. You need to be able to press hard, and then when the ball is lost, you need to be able to retreat. And obviously, when you're defending deep, you need to be able to sprint and get 1v1 against your winger and against your fullback and try to create some kind of issues. Very interestingly, Dan, Dango Watara, who I mentioned earlier on in the pod, who is a winger, has been used as a left back by Raola. So just to give him a challenge, saying, are you able to be the additional attacker we need in this situation? Can we sort of shift the backline a little bit in which you get the chance to attack from deep, from a position where the opposition isn't expecting it? And those little things that Irella's trying have been pretty intriguing for me. He's made some glaring errors, but he's also done some very good things in terms of substitutions and fixing things. So quite an interesting manager. But again, the wingers are going to be 1v1 very dominant. Um, Semenyo is a tank. He's built almost like Adama Traore. He's deceptively quick and he's very, very strong. So he's going to be hard to push off whoever is going to play against him. And Clivert is also very, very direct. He'll be running at defenders on both flanks. I should also mention both of them switch quite often. So one might end up on the left flank, and the next attack they might switch. So both fullbacks have to be aware of what is happening in that regard. Solanke, we all know very well. Ex Cobham broke all kinds of records when he was with us, in the academy. Unfortunately, didn't get the chance that he merited in senior football. Obviously, was a little bit of a slow starter, late bloomer, but so happy to see him do really, really well. But he's evolved into almost an all-action centre forward, where he's able to be a target man. He's got the physique for it. He can drop. He can run the channels. He can also link up with people. So when he does get away from the back line, then you have to make sure you don't give him time to turn and find players ahead of him, because then he can be a menace. And Enes Unal, who I mentioned, is somebody who came in maybe I think in the winter transfer window, but he's a completely different kind of striker. He's more of the classic nine kind of center forward who'll get into the box, try to get at the end of headers and power them in. So he's somebody that you have to be careful about. especially in the latter stages of the game. I don't think he'll start this one, but yeah, if he does come on, then we need somebody like a Badia Shield to be on him at all times. Like you mentioned, very very strong in first half of games. Usually don't concede a lot in the first half an hour, so we have to be patient. Maybe it's also like the time where they're at their freshest, where their press is again very good, but once that energy levels start wearing off in the second half is when they become a little open. They also tend to score more in the last dying stages of the game, but they also concede more. So chaos embracing in the last 15 minutes is something that we have to be careful about. I've also seen that they are not very good at keeping leads and they're not very good when they go ahead. They tend to concede a lot more in both those situations, but they're very good from 0-0. They do take a lot of leads when they're level. So I would say if you do go one up or one down, there's a chance to go two up or there's a chance to draw level. So don't get disheartened. Don't get disheartened if you don't make a breakthrough in the first 30 minutes. And yeah, it will hopefully give you enough time to make ground. Another interesting stat I sort of discovered when I was digging, Dan, is that in the Premier League, they've not lost a game in which they've had 54% of the ball or more. So if
Oh,
you're looking for one, just try to keep the ball away from them as much as possible. Even though they don't like to do a lot with it, it's just a pretty concerning stat. So I would want to keep a keen eye on that one.
I mean, in general, though, I feel like we've been the type of side to, particularly in our home matches. I don't think there's, maybe we've had wins with like less than 40% of the ball, though. I mean, the three matches that we played at home against Brighton, Spurs, and Brighton again, we had 39, 37, and 32% possession. And we won all three of those. We won it 3-2, 2-0, and then 1-0. So I guess we're comfortable at home not having possession. But I think on the flip side, too, like we have lost games at home with a ton of possession. And so it's just a weird, that's interesting. I don't know how to take that. I don't know. You set it up for me interesting, and I don't know how I should guide the listener on that one.
Tough one, to be honest. I really thought that, with having watched Pochettino at like Tottenham Hotspur and then at PSG, where obviously his team was supposed to be dominant, I didn't quite know what to expect in terms of against bigger teams. Would we be happy conceding possession? Would we be, like Tottenham were in the big games, you try to hit them on the break, or would we be more assertive with the quality that he has? And we've seen shades of both. Obviously some of them were, I would say, game state influence, where we were a man down or something. Brighton in the reverse fixture, for example, at 68% possession, but that was because Conor Gallagher got sent off at halftime. But even before that, they were shading the ball for quite a lot of that half, and we just looked like we were comfortable doing that, like just letting the ball be there. And again, Dan, maybe like it's also been an identity crisis for us because earlier on in the season, when we did leave the ball to around like 50-55% of the possession, sometimes even lesser, we would be able to exploit a lot of transition opportunities, which really suited our attackers. And every time we tried keeping a lot of the ball, so for example, the most possession we've had, 75% in the second game of the season, West Ham United lost 3-1. Nottingham Forest, 75%, lost 1-0. Which are the ones? Brentford, 68%, lost 2-0. So yeah, just a repeating pattern. Everton 71% lost 2-0. So in that early part of the season, we were obviously like, okay, what do we do when we have so much of the ball? And
Yeah.
when we don't have attackers who are used to playing with each other, when they don't know how to break down a static low block. But again, we've now arrived at that juncture of the season where those things have started to turn. Players are starting to play well together. When we have a lot of the ball, we tend to use it wisely. We're not just going, hoofing it into the box and hoping Jackson gets ahead to it. We're actually using it in a way that gives us the optimal chance to create something from it. There have been great rotations. Sometimes you see Caicedo go from defensive midfield, make an underlap near the box and cut back. Sometimes you see Gallagher in those positions. Sometimes you see Gusto in like these half space positions trying to cross. So all sorts of permutations and combinations have been tried over 40 odd games before we were right at this juncture. And I think we've come to a point where now we're not afraid as such of low blocks. We're actually relishing the challenge of going up against them. So if we do get 60%, 65% of the ball against Bournemouth, then I expect us to do well. They've got a very good defense, but I expect us to have a lot more solutions that we did in the reverse fixture.
Well, what about the other ways that maybe Chelsea are going to have a chance to go up against this side? So, are there other things that Pochettino and the team, beyond relishing the opportunity to go up against a low block to challenge their defenders on the day? It feels as if there's things like the over reliance on an individual goal scorer, which, to be fair, we have had a large reliance on Cole Palmer. So I can't blame another club for trying to hitch their wagon to one of their attackers. And then maybe how they are kind of within transition. I think maybe those are areas I like to hear more about.
Absolutely. I would say that the one thing that struck out for me when I was watching their game against Arsenal, in which they lost quite heavily, was that maybe the team structure when they're trying to do something with the ball betrays them a bit. So their defensive midfielders, the central midfield combinations, are very ball winning heavy. They are not really sides that depend a lot on keeping the ball. So the players also are sort of used to pressing, making sure that they're cutting spaces in transition. They're guys with great engines, but not necessarily those that will be comfortable under pressure or will be able to weave out of pressure in tight spaces and retain the ball. So what Arsenal did was just their usual thing. They kept the ball in the opposition half, and whenever the ball was lost, even before the central midfielders could look where to pass the ball was won back. So there was no time, no space for them to hit transitions. Every time Solanke got the ball, by the time Semenyo tried to burst forward, the ball was lost. So if you close down spaces, if you limit them to the tight center from where you suffocate them and get the ball back as soon as possible. A good counter press, especially on the central midfielders. If you can set up traps there, pressing traps there, you have every chance of nicking the ball away or just denying them the opportunity to use that space in behind when you're being aggressive. So I think that's something that you have to use. The second one you referenced was an over reliance on certain individuals. Obviously, we've had the same issue. We've talked about Cole Palmer, but yeah, we've got two guys now in double figures. We've got Palmer at 22, and we've got with 14, and the rest have chipped in too with goals and assists. But you look at Bournemouth's tally. There's Dominic Solanke with I think 19, and the next one is at 8 or 7. So it's a huge drop off between the top scorer and the next one. That's 36.5% of the goals that they've scored in the league coming from one person, which is quite heavy. And the rest don't tend to do a lot, except like I mentioned, the wingers will get a lot of chances, a lot of opportunities to get 1v1 to create a lot of nuisance. So Semenyo and Clivert are two guys that we have to keep an eye on in the front three, but the rest not very threatening as such. Senesi will be a threat from set pieces. I will say that. So from corners, be very careful from Marco Senesi. He is very good in the air. And but in open play, I don't really think there's any other danger as long as you do your responsibilities right.
And then as we think about, other things, I mean, some of the man marking, I think, is another area, and just the set pieces, I think they're good at, but not necessarily an airily dominant side in general. So I think those are other things that maybe Chelsea can try to pick at in order to make sure we get the maximum points versus the split point on the day.
Yeah, I think again the system, the hybrid pressing system, which relies on being very man marking oriented when they're pressing us in those advanced areas, that can be manipulated. I went back and watched Manchester City's game in that 6-1 win that they had. Uh, they just were devastating. And they picked apart Bournemouth with surgical precision. Obviously, Man City is Man City, and that's like the creme de la creme any attacking strategy that you want to employ, but the fluidity in rotations, just how easily they were able to, at one point, for example, Kyle Walker just ran without the ball, and Milos Kerkez, who was the left back then, just got confused. He was like, maybe I should run with Walker as well. And just following Walker into his own defensive third, there was so much space there for Phil Foden to collect, pick a diagonal for Jeremy Doku, and then boom, they scored a goal. So those kind of things tend to happen when you're very man marking reliant. United have suffered because of it. Leeds United, when they were there in the Premier League under Marcelo Bielsa, suffered because of it. And I think Bournemouth also suffer from being very man marking reliant. You can pull them up and down. I did see a lot of interesting rotations in the match against Brighton from us. At one point in time, both our fullbacks were inverting. So I saw Gusto and Kukurea together in the middle of the park, and Caicedo was at right back and Gallagher was at left back. And I was like, wait, I haven't seen this before. And there was some other interesting stuff. Gusto ended up almost like Pedro Porro does in Ange Postecoglou's 4-2-3-1. He was in that right attacking space, half space, trying to pin the fullback, and he received in that area to break the press. So we've got some good rotations going. And I would say that if you want to be brave against Bournemouth, then that's the way to go. You have to confuse them, you have to disorient them. It took some time for Brighton to get used to what we were doing, and I expect them to maybe struggle a little bit when we do the same things against them. So I think that man marking getting upset will give us a little bit of area to play with when we're playing out. So I think that's one thing to keep an eye on. And the last thing I would say is again just aerial competitiveness. Their ability to be good in the air is not good. The third poorest side in the air in the Premier League, and percentages can be deceptive, but it does look like they're good at set pieces, defensive set pieces. They haven't conceded too many, and not in like terrible company there. But yeah, I would say that maybe if you can get 1v1 under certain circumstances, then there's a good chance that you can create something. So that's about it. I think all the bases covered, but most importantly, I think it's just a good way to be able to maybe give them a lot to think about when they're marking you and try to press them, try to be aggressive. We did the same thing with Brighton, won the ball a lot of times in those central areas. If you can do that with the same opposition, then hopefully it'll be job done soon and early, and we'll have a nice sending off with Thiago Silva to go with it.
Yeah, a clean sheet and mission complete banner unfurling would be quite the way to end this fixture and end the Premier League season for Chelsea. But we're going to talk about a few things and considerations that Pochettino and the squad will have in mind as they head into this match. Before we do that, though, our last ad break. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. So, Sam, I think one of the big challenges, as we talked about some of the players who either through action or being the subject of an action are not going to be available heading into this fixture that we know, again, in advance of the Friday press conferences. Pochettino is going to have to tinker with his lineup a little bit. He also has players who are coming back healthy, who have featured from a cameo perspective, who might get a start. I mean, how do you see the lineup looking for the final match of the season?
I think there are some interesting decisions to be made. I don't know whether Silva starts. Obviously, there was some talk about him getting the captain's armband, and maybe that's why he got a little bit of a breather midweek against Brighton. So maybe he starts. But yeah, I think Chalobah has been very good. Badiashile has also sort of picked up form. He had a little bit of a shaky performance in between, but the rest seems to be improving. So I do think it'll be nice to see both of them start again. But obviously, Silva is a big factor in this one. So I don't know what happens with the CD pairing. I also don't know whether Malo Gusto is fit because he did go off and he did go down, I think, 2 or 3 times in that game against Brighton. So don't know if it was cramped, don't know if it was something that he'd felt before in one of his injury layoffs. We still haven't had that injury report, no word from Portugal yet. So that defense will be interesting. I think Kukurea is probably the only one along with Chalobah who's just made sure that he's going to start, but the rest can go up and down. So I have a question mark there. Caicedo Gallagher not going to change. Left wing is going to be quite interesting. I don't know whether Raheem Sterling or Nkunku could start, but after Nkunku's performance in that game, I was blown away. I mean, I've seen him extensively for Leipzig, but then he got injured, and to see that in a Chelsea shirt was something special. This is the kind of performance that just has you at the edge of your seat saying, Jesus, how good is this guy? And where was this quality all season? So if I had a chance to make, I know Sterling got a great goal against Forest, probably deserves to start. But I would definitely go with Nkunku. At least for 60 minutes. I don't want to push it when we've been this close to sealing a European spot, but just the quality on display. How good we've looked in his cameo performances, absolutely spectacular. So I would definitely start with that one, and the rest of the side remains the same. I don't know if you've got any changes in mind, and would you largely agree this is what it'll be like?
No, I think you want to get the party started early, right? So if you talk about this idea of Nkunku starting over Raheem Sterling, I think that's one I can absolutely get on board with and get behind. And I think getting to see the blue balloon blowing up celebration from Christopher was quite wonderful for those who were there to get a chance to witness it in person, but also for all of us who got a chance to watch it on broadcast as well. So to see maybe another one of those before the end of the season at Stamford Bridge for the home supporters would be absolutely delightful. And it would be nice to say, hey, we've rounded out the season, we've secured our position, we've done everything to the maximum that we need to do. I think the pairing of the Chalaba and Thiago Silva one more time running it back would be a very fitting and almost like a baton handoff moment from a center back perspective, because I think you and I are on the same page of selling Trev Chalaba would be a mistake heading into the summer, even though he looks at someone at looking at a spreadsheet of numbers might see the pure profit margin on someone like Trev and think it's a great business, but it feels like any replacement you would look at in this moment to do what he's doing for this side with the positional flexibility he has would be an absolute uh, disaster in a waste of appropriate development of a individual into this first team side. And so, no, I mean, I think I'm right there with you on what a starting 11 should be. Any youth players that you think deserve that last maybe couple minutes of the season cameo if things are going well from the way that they've played?
I mean, I would love to see Josh Achimpong maybe being used
There
at
you
right back,
go.
considering we don't have Reese. Yeah, considering we don't have Reese. But then again, I think just by virtue of seniority, maybe if that change has to be made, I don't know if Alfie Gilchrist comes first. He gets maybe a spot at right back and goes up against a pretty good winger. So maybe it'll be another good challenge for him. The last one in front of a home crowd before he most probably goes on loan and gets some vital experience. Maybe him. The rest, I'm not certain. I'm not quite sure if we get to see anybody else step in. Cassidy has not been used much. Maybe Bosch doesn't trust him in those deeper positions, which is something that I also can see because a lot of people who I talked to who had been close to Cassidy said that he's an eight, but yeah, there's a certain specific role that you need for him, which I think is sort of dying out, which is like a second striker role, maybe behind the center forward. So if you're playing a 4-2-3-1 with a 10 who's dropping and being a bit of a nuisance, I think you could use him when you're chasing a goal. But other than that, maybe in those deeper positions, not quite there yet. So I don't see him maybe getting minutes here. So probably in that right back slot is where I would say the money is. But yeah, I don't really mind if somebody else on the bench gets a nice run out and some nice warm applause from the Stamford Bridge faithful before they go on their respective loans.
One thing that I think is interesting that we've seen over the last couple of matches is the way that Mark Cucurella is been used as this inverted fullback, and I think there's the pros and cons of his deployment. There's the absolute shithouse that he has shown both on social media and on the pitch, sometimes to maybe seeing a little little too much red mist in the moment. Maybe orange haze would be better way to think about it. As but he's tended to avoid getting carded in some situations too. So it's as maybe inheriting the title of Master of the Dark Arts. But what's your outlook on just how he's closing out the season and what his performance, how Pochettino has used him, Chilwell's long return to fitness and challenge of staying fit. How does that how is that all influencing your thoughts about what Chelsea's going to do this summer from a left back position? Are we going to be talking about that as we do our transfer preview episodes this summer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you remember, Dan, but before we even met in the United States, you asked me to go to a press conference, and the player doing the press conference there was Marco Correa. So having seen him up close, and he's just a lovely, lovely guy, just seems like a really good presence in the dressing room. Funny, loves talking to people. So generally, when you've been around like more the person than the footballer, you tend to have a little bit of affinity. You want them to do well, which I really hope a lot of people saw the human factor behind. So I've always wanted him to do well. I do have complaints with regards to just, how he plays, and there are some glaring technical flaws in the way that he defends. But yeah, I mean, getting him that role, which is maybe saving him a little bit of grief from the things that he doesn't like doing or not is not good at doing consistently, that has been good. Is he a transformative signing? No, I don't think so. I think he's again somebody who's an extra body in that area and able to give Caicedo a little bit of license, able to give Gallagher more license to maybe jump forward. But he's still got limitations even in that position where he's mostly just being used as a wall passer to get the ball back. He's not turning in those pressure situations. His body positioning is only skewed to one way. So he always uses one foot and it's always like almost always passing back. You look at somebody, even like a Jorginho, in those positions, he will like drop his shoulder, he'll twist around, get out of pressure, pass forward. You rarely see that from Kukurea, but he's playing it safe, which is fine. But is he worth keeping for what has been sort of like a interesting fix for him? I don't think so. I think like if the club does get an offer, then without a doubt we consider that. I think we bite somebody's hand off and say, would you pay decent money for him? And then we look at left back options. There are some interesting young ones. I don't think there is a standout left back option which I look at and say, wow, like that's below 30 million and can be incredible. There are some good ones, but not brilliant ones. So we will definitely be talking about left backs in the summer transfer window. I've been watching a couple of them, so hopefully we'll have a lot more to go on by the time we get to that juncture. But I'm super happy for Kukurea. I think he deserves his plaudits. I think the Brighton win was an extra plus for him, considering how much he got from the Brighton fans. And super happy that there's been a little bit of a remontada. But I think if we can upgrade in that position, we would. And that's what I expect the club to do.
And you mentioned it too, and I want to spend just maybe a couple minutes before we wrap on this episode, but just the excitement around Nkunku, how you're feeling about this end of the season here with the fact that what is happening for him this summer in terms of inclusion, not inclusion within certain competitions, and the readiness or jumping off point for next season based upon what we've seen, just even in this brief little bit of return to the side.
I'm not going to lie, Dan. I expected him to be sluggish. Whenever I've seen him come back from long layoffs, he does look slow. He does look like he's struggling a little bit to be agile. He's not explosive. I'll say that with 100% certainty. He's not explosive, but he's extremely agile. And you can usually tell how by quickly he turns, by how good he looks when he's controlling the ball. But when I've seen him now, he looks close to full fitness, which is very, very encouraging. And I think the biggest issue for us, I wouldn't say issue, maybe like a bit of a question mark, a bit of a challenge to figure out would be how to incorporate an out of possession structure with him and Cole Palmer in the same side. I think that's going to be a big, big question mark. It does make us weaker a little bit. Mudrik hasn't been like phenomenal out of possession, so there's that. But again, Nkunku is somebody who I've been a little miffed with because he doesn't track fully. Sometimes he also presses a little casually. Does that change under Mauricio Pochettino? We haven't had a sustained run of games to see it, but undeniably, when he's on the ball, he's better than anybody else we have. That is without a shadow of a doubt. And I'll say this despite Cole Palmer having the season he's had. Nkunku's ability to be a threat on the ball and without it is unparalleled. I mean, Palmer could learn so much about just how to move when you're passing, which spaces to attack, just how good he's in the air for somebody who's quite short as well. He's very good with his headers. Just the way he moves, the way he arrives to strike the ball. Look at that goal that he scored against Brighton, the winning goal. He comes in, uses Jackson's decoy at the post to draw a centre back out, and he peels away and arrives at the penalty spot just to like calmly caress it in as if like it was the easiest thing in the world to do. That's the quality. And that's why he got the amount of goals that he did in the Bundesliga. So if he does stay fit next season, and I'm keeping my fingers, my intestines crossed on that one that he is, he's easily like, Palmer's number kind of guy. He could get 20, 25 goals assists. Easy. I would say easily in this system. It's tailor made for him. But again, like how does our defense work? How does he look in high stake games where there's an emphasis on being very compact out of possession? We've seen Manchester City, we've seen Arsenal, the two guys who are fighting for the title, sacrifice maybe more explosive players for being more compact without the ball. And that's the question that maybe Pochettino and the directors and the players have to ask themselves, saying, do we become stronger and more compact and lose a little bit of quality, or where do we go from here? So that's going to be the question. But it's been like I would definitely say that on behalf of all of us, it's been great to see that we are one goal away from doubling last season's Premier League tally. We've been
Oh,
playing some free flowing football. Yeah, and we've not hit this juncture, I think, after Thomas Tuchel, I think we've already surpassed this point. So we haven't been this close to 76, 77 goals in a long, long time. Maybe the last time we won the title, I guess. So everybody enjoys the attacking side of the game. The defensive side obviously needs to improve, but everybody's conceding. The Premier League's more open than it ever was. So only the top three are keeping good defensive records, but Brighton's conceded 60, United 60, Newcastle 60, Chelsea 60, Bournemouth 60, Wolves 60. So the entire mid-table is just completely porous. So maybe it's a sign of the times changing, and attacks becoming more valuable. So helps to have somebody like an Nkunku in those situations.
well, it will be exciting to see him involved in any capacity in this last match of the season, but hopefully it's for more minutes and with more goal celebrations on the day. It would also be nice to see Cole add an additional amount as well as Nico. Everybody should just get involved in this last day of the season. It should be an absolute party, and we should be loving it as Chelsea round out the season in fine form. And we're hoping that they do by beating up on another B based team, Bournemouth, after beating up on Brighton. So that's going to do it for this episode. We've done our last match preview of the season, Sam. It's over, it's locked. And I guess the question now is, how excited are you to take a little bit of a breather before we get into transfer special episodes over the weeks and months ahead?
Breather. Did you just say breather?
Yeah.
I have the Olympics, I have Copa America, I have Euros, and I basically have preseason. So I have four tournaments before the next season even starts. So I
Oh,
will
you're fine.
easily be clocking up. I'll be clocking at least 100 games in the next 3 months. So I get no rest for, I wouldn't say the wicked, but yeah, whatever, like for the football scout. So I'll be watching a lot of games. Luckily, a lot of the Chelsea related youngsters are playing in the Copa America, so I'm excited for that. I'm excited to do a lot of transfer specials with you. That's always like been one of like our trademark things at LIVP. So I'm hoping that we get to do that super soon. So I'll be working hard on those.
Yeah, and for those who have not yet, hit us up with names that you're super interested for us to check out. Odds are Sam has already probably done a little bit of research on the majority of major names, and then also on our next level or super smart signings. And maybe that's the way we're going to brand it this year, TM. That would be the balance of really, really good and potentially appropriately valued versus overpriced solutions that Chelsea might be into the market for. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening to all of our match previews that we've done this season. We're excited to work on them and improve them as we head into next season. So if you have thoughts, opinions, what you'd like to see, always let us know. But hopefully you can enjoy the last Premier League match day of the season this Sunday. We will be doing a YouTube live directly after the final whistle. Hopefully, after Chelsea have beaten Bournemouth and Arsenal have watched the league fall through their hands another time. But that is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.